Hey everyone, this is Kurt with Aero Concepts. We're here to install the new ZL1 1LE Aero package on Rafi's car here. We're going to start with a couple of the easier things. We're going to do the rear rocker extensions with the strakes and the side rocker extensions first, and then we're going to move to the front splitter extension with our support rods. So this video is going to show you kind of how to install everything. First, we're going to start with the rear rockers, and what we're going to do is take off these 4 factory screws here to install the rear rocker. We've gone ahead and screwed those screws back into our plate now, and we're going to drill a 5/16 hole through the factory part on both of these 2 holes, and then we'll insert our fastener and screw. Alright, now here's the rear rocker installed, and you can see the strake's already attached to it. The strake we glue on with the caulking the night before so those could dry. Once you give those about 24 or 48 hours to dry, they're pretty solid, and that caulking glues them in really good. So we got the rear rocker on. Now we're going to go to the side rocker, and I have it up on the lift, but I've laid it here next to the car. And basically what we're going to do is drill all the hole locations with the 5/16 drill bit into the factory rocker. And we're going to create that hole for all the fasteners to go into. So we're going to drill all those out. Basically, what you need to do is align the 2 ends here where it's flush with the wheel wells. Okay. And then the back edge is straight. You're going to align this with the back edge of the rear rocker, or sorry, on the side rocker at the rear. And then there's also a point up in the front that you're going to line that edge up to. And then clamp that in place. I put a little spring clamp right there to hold it in place. And then we drill a couple holes. Put a fastener in those couple holes first, so that helps hold it. And then finish out drilling all the other holes. Okay, now I've got it clamped on really quick. Those are my spring clamps, but I got it fastened on the back. See how the edge is all lined up on the back edge? Here on the wheel well, and also here. Okay, now we're ready to drill the holes. Okay, now we got this extension on, all the fasteners in. So the fasteners come with these plastic screws. Got to rip those out and put the stainless screws in there. That fastener goes up into the hole and wedges and creates a flange on the back side. That's it. Now you have that extension line going around the bottom of the car, tying in with the rear rocker, and then once we get the splitter on, that line will continue around, and then the splitter is going to hang out also. Alright, so we pulled the front bumper off. If you don't know this process, there's about 35, maybe 40 screws that you got to take a lot off along the bottom of the bumper. The fender liner here. There's some bolts or screws up in here that you take off, and then everything along the top up here, you take those fasteners out, and the screws on this side also. When you get the bumper off, you're going to see the crash rails exposed. Before, it was covered with a piece of plastic, and then over here you had the tow hook receiver sticking through in that plastic cover. basically you're going to use that as a reference point of where we're going to drill our holes on the front bumper. But our crash rail kit here for the hardware on the support rods, you'll end up with this aluminum block that you drill in. You put a couple of screws, or sorry, a couple of holes here, and then put the screws in there. It holds this aluminum block that's set inside there. And then we give you a couple, a piece of all thread and an aluminum sleeve that'll bottom out against the washer here. And you end up with about 3/8 of an inch of the all thread sticking through the bumper, along with a short piece of the sleeve here. What happens, that support rod will bottom out onto that sleeve, and that's how it becomes tight. And then now it's rigidly fastened to the crash rail, sticking out about 5 inches. All right, so you need to take that and reference those points down into the bumper. And if you see, we drilled a couple holes. There's one on the other side, and then on the back we drill a large hole so the rod could come through, and there's a bunch of foam in there that you got to kind of hog out with the drill bit. So when you go to set the bumper back on, that's where the rod's going to go through the all thread. Okay, we're on to the front splitter install. So we've done the installation of the winglets and the apron, and I typically do this a day or so ahead of time. And what we do, we caulk that in to the groove that's there. That's the back side. You want a kind of generous amount around there, that way it kind of helps glue it in. The front side, you want a nice clean bead. What I do, I let it ooze out, and I got this one kind of set up like that already. We fill that crack up with the caulking, push the piece in, make sure it's square, and just let it sit. Once that caulking dries, it becomes like glue in that groove, and the piece is held in. So after that, we go back and pick that off, and then lay a nice clean bead like I did over here on this one. If you could see that. And then let that dry again. And then it's ready to install. So our first steps of installing is taking off all the wind deflectors that they have on here. And I've already removed all those. That's the plastic pieces that kind of skirt through here. Those are designed to deflect the air around the wheel a certain way. And then we remove all those fasteners along the front edge that the factory has. And then also we remove these 4 bolts, the factory bolts that hold this pan on. And then there's 2 more, one here and one on the other side, that you remove. We're going to replace those with longer hardware that we're going to supply you with some spacers. So all that needs to be removed. The only one that you leave in is this one right here, and that helps keep this in line because all these fasten points are kind of just floating here. So we want to keep this one here, that way it kind of holds that in place while we bolt our piece on. Okay, we're underneath here. So the way I do this is these 4 factory bolts replacements, and then this one here, and there's one on the other side. We put those in loosely, and there's a spacer that goes in between that. I don't know if you could see that spacer in there? That keeps the whole plate flat. So you got to tuck that in there, leave them all loose because it's kind of a pain in the butt to get your fingers up in there and hold it. Get those all in, and then these 4 along the front also set up, but keep them loose. There's a 3/4 inch spacer on the other side of those. That's at the tip here. Sorry. Once we get all those in, then we could start putting all these outer ones in, which are the factory replacements. We'll put all those in loosely again, and then once we get them all kind of lined up, then we tighten them down. Okay, now we've finished basically screwing all the screws on underneath and made everything tight, and now we're putting on the rods. So before you had the all thread sticking through, now you put on the sleeve. We painted the sleeve black just to hide it more. Just slip on the sleeve. It'll end up bottoming out on the crash rail, and you'll have about 3/8 of a thread showing here. Once you do that, take your rod in, thread it on, spin it on. Once you get to a certain tightness, start using the rod as kind of a wrench. Try not to tweak it too much. Sorry. All right, get the angle that we want, and then we're gonna basically mock up the angle for both sides, how we did that. Next step, you basically tape here, drill a hole, and then insert a screw from the bottom, and that fastens it. And then you make a small adjustment on the rod to kind of stiffen it up, and then you're all done.